Hi, this is 10 with Jesus, a little time of devotion that's usually about 10 minutes long. So 10-ish minutes with Jesus, maybe we should call it. How do you respond to somebody who is in need? There are two stories today to look at, both of them out of 2 Kings chapter 4. The first story is about the wife of a man who is a part of the guild of the prophets. He died, and she was left with two children, two sons. Now, the problem is that this family was in debt, and the only way in that day for her to be able to pay off the debt was to give up her sons into slavery. So she is desperate, and she comes to Elisha with this need, and his response, how can I help? And I believe that that is the first response that any of us as followers of Jesus can have for anybody who is in need. How can I help? Not just let me know if I can help, because that's too easy to just say no to, or that's just too easy to be able to just kind of say as a manner of saying, well, I'm got it off my chest that I offered. Ask, how can I help, is a far different thing. And it evokes a more specific answer. So Elisha says to her, how can I help? And what winds up happening is they collect all of the jars in the neighborhood and they go into the house. There's a little bit of oil, and Elisha tells the woman to pour the oil into the jars that she has already. And it winds up filling all of these jars, and she's able to sell the oil for enough profit to pay off her debts and to live on. So this tells us something about the character of God here. He doesn't just respond to a need, and then when the need's fulfilled, it's done. He provides with abundance. He gives us even more than we need in the moment because he knows what our needs will continue to be. So there's a story there about desperation and a story about God's response through Elisha to this desperation. Then there's another story. It's about a woman of Shunem, and she is providing meals. She is providing boarding for Elisha and his servant Gehazi. Whenever they come through, they're able to stay in a room that they build onto their house. She's a woman who is a leading woman of the community there in Shunem, and she not only feeds Elisha and Gehazi, she houses them. Builds a room onto the house specifically for that purpose. This is Elisha's room. And so Elisha wants to show appreciation, asks, what can I do? Not, I want to do something, not something that would just evoke a yes or no response, but what can I do to repay you? And so he gives her the opportunity to answer specifically. Now, she does what many of us would do in that situation. We're if we're secure, if we're doing okay, we tend to just kind of say things like, well, you don't have to do anything for me. I appreciate you. That's enough. You don't have to do anything. And so Elisha figures out, though, that through Gehazi, there's no son in the family. There's no child. And that's a big deal in those days, because having children is a sign of God's blessing. It's a sign of continued prosperity for your family. And so he promises her, by this time next year, you're going to be holding a newborn son. And sure enough, that's what happens. Now, it's interesting that her response to that promise was, don't build up hopes like that. So I have a hunch that she had hoped for a son before this point in time. So she says to her, don't build up hopes like that. But then sure enough, a year later, she has this child. She's no longer childless. Then this child suddenly dies. And her response is to take this child, put him in Elisha's room, and then go find Elisha. And when she finds him, she doesn't talk to the servant. She goes straight to the man who made the promise and says to him, look, I told you not to build up hopes. And now I have a dead child at home. I told you not to do this. And Elisha springs into action. This cry of anger, this anguish, this grieving need is responded to. He goes into action. Gehazi goes and puts his staff on the boy's body over his face. Elisha gets there, starts with prayer, stretches himself out on the boy, feels the warmth coming back, but yet no breath yet. He paces around, probably praying some more, comes back, stretches himself out again on this child, and he comes back to life, sneezes 7 times. I don't want to overanalyze 7 sneezes. People sometimes do that with numbers, but the point is, his life is restored. God has responded to this cry, this need of grief, this need of anguish, this almost anger there. You built up my hopes only to snatch it away? But God responds to that. Who do you go to when you have a need? Well, I would suggest just first of all, like these 2 women who had a need, they went straight to the one that they knew could do something about it. They went straight to a man of God. Our temptation sometimes is to go to a book, go to all of these various things without first going to God. Now, don't get me wrong. It's not wrong, for instance, to go to the doctor if you're sick. It's not wrong, for instance, to go to somebody, that might be able to help you out. And that's what they did. They knew Elisha could do something about it as a man of God. So they did that. Go to the one you know can do something about it. Second of all, if you are in need, cry out to God. And the amazing thing is he responds to needs of anger and anguish and grief. He responds to desperation. And then he provides. He provides both of them, life for the boy and enough to be able to pay off debts for the other woman. God responds. Now, what if you're the person who comes across somebody in need? How do you respond to that? Well, first of all, realize you're a tool in the hands of God. This is not just your problem. It's God's problem, because the person in need is God's child, not necessarily yours. Yeah, maybe it could be your physical child who's in need, but ultimately that's a child of God. So this is God's problem. But you get to be the response to the need because God uses you. That's an amazing thing. And that's what happens with Elisha here. There's a need of desperation. There's a need of grief and anguish. God responds through that human agency in Elisha, and he can respond in us. When we make that need our problem, as though it's an obligation or something we have to do, here's what happens a lot of time. We respond to the need in a way that we think is necessary, but it actually winds up not helping. Or we respond to a need that we think they have, but that may not be really the questions they're asking. But when we take the need first to God, first of all, we say, how can we help, or what can we do so that people can actually respond? Then we need to listen, by the way. Not judge, but listen. Then take it to the Lord. Lord, how can you use me to help this person right now who has this need? We come across people who have needs all the time. We come across people that we see with signs on the corner. And sometimes the best thing is not to help them in the way that you think at that moment is to help them. There may be other ways. We come across other needs. We come across people who are mourning and in grief. We come across people maybe in line at the grocery store. They can't pay for all of their groceries and their card's being declined and they're embarrassed. You may have an opportunity in that moment to fulfill a need and be the hands and feet of Jesus. If we are to extend the ministry of Christ into our community with hope and wholeness, make yourself available to God every day. Offer yourself to be the hands and feet that fulfill the needs that God knows need fulfilling. And then when you see the need, how can I help? What can I do? Listen. Take it to the Lord. It's his problem, not yours, but he can use you to fill a need that in a way that you never dreamed possible. That's my challenge to you, is when you have a need, take it to the one who can do something about it. And if you see somebody in need, ask, listen, take it to the Lord, offer your hands, offer your feet to be the hands and feet of Jesus to fulfill any given need you may come across. God bless.